So this is the final video in the series, and what I'm going to show you how to do in this lesson is weave in the ends of yarn that you have hanging off of the corners of your knitted square. And you're going to need a tapestry needle like this one and a pair of scissors to trim your yarn ends. And as you can see, I've got a pretty long tail of yarn here, so I'm just going to trim this down to make it a little bit more manageable. I'm just going to snip it about here. So I've got enough to work with, but not so much that it's getting in my way. I'll move that out of the way, and then what I want to do is just thread this end of yarn onto my tapestry needle, like so. I'm just using this very, very garishly bright orange one just so you can see it a little bit more clearly. And you just want to pull that through a little bit. And what we want to do is weave in the ends on the wrong side of the work, because this is the right side and this is the bit that will be facing out. So we want to do it on the opposite side of the work where you're not going to see it as much. So if you turn it over, this is where we want to do it. So what we're going to do is just take this end of yarn. As you can see, it's coming out on the right side, so we just want to take it through to the back. Now I'm just going to go through a little space here in this corner, just so it's coming through onto the back wrong side of the work, and that just means it'll be a little bit more camouflaged and it's going to look a little bit more neat. So I'm just going to turn it over now, and what we want to do, there's a lot of different ways to weave in ends, but this is the way that I exclusively use, and we're going to go, this is how people tend to go through, they just pick a few loops and pull it through, but I find that to be a much less effective way, and the end tends to pull out and then it looks messy and you end up unravelling your work. You can see this loop here and these sort of bumps. What I want to do is follow the journey of a piece of a strand of yarn. Now that might sound a bit strange, but the anatomy of a stitch is it sort of loops linking together. And what you want to do, if you look very, very closely, you want to see the yarn goes in here and comes out here and then up through this loop, and it sort of curves round then to the right, and it sort of makes a squiggly zigzag sort of sideways S shape almost. And what we want to do is follow that around. So I'm going to go through this loop. I'm going to go down and through the loop, and I'm just going to pull my yarn all the way through, like so. So then, if you look at the, if you look where that tail of yarn is coming out, you can see that there's a loop. It's almost like it's a U shape. It's an upside down sort of. It's a U shape. And what I'm going to do is follow that strand of yarn, and I'm going to replicate it. So I'm going to put my needle up through this loop here, if you can see that. So I'm following that U shape with my yarn, which you'll see once I've pulled the yarn through. There we go. So you can see now that it's sort of following that shape. So what we're going to do is pull this apart a little bit so we can see the journey of that yarn. It's coming out of this loop and going up here, and it goes behind these two strands and then comes out and back down. So if you just watch where I'm putting my needle now, I'm going to slot it under those two strands of yarn. So it goes up here and under these two, if I can get my needle in, just under and out there. And there's this strand of yarn coming down here, and this is what we're following. The journey of this strand of yarn is what we're following. So then we're going to go back down and through the same loop that we've just come out of. This one here, you see. So this starts to make this sort of squiggly line almost, but really we're just following the anatomy of the stitches that we've already made. So I'm going to go up through this one now again replicating that U shape. And we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to go up through the loop, and then we're going to go under the 2 stitches above it. So if you can see, the yarn goes up and under these 2 stitches. Oh, it's not even 2 stitches, it's just sort of 2 legs of a stitch, really. It's just 1 stitch we're going under. We're going to take it under them, pull it all the way through, and then following that strand of yarn, we're going to go back down through the loop we just came out of. And if you remember what I said right at the very beginning, one of the things that I find most important when learning how to knit is watching the shapes that I am making with my needles and the yarn. So it may sound awfully complicated when I'm trying to describe it, but the best way to learn it is to watch it and just really focus on where the yarn is going and the shapes that are being made, because describing it, saying this piece of yarn on the left crosses over this piece on the right and goes under this piece and takes the next turning on the left, it's confusing to anybody. Watching how it's put together makes much more sense. So we just continue this process, really, following the journey of this strand of yarn. And you can do it for as long as you like. I tend to do it for about an inch or so, and it's just very good because it stretches with the fabric itself. So instead, when you stretch a piece of fabric, so if you're wearing a cardigan and you have a tail of yarn that's just tucked through a few stitches, it's going to start to work its way out. This way it's well and truly secure, and it's just never working its way back out of that. And then once you wash it, it's going to set in place, so it's going to be even more so. So we do have another tail end, and I'm just showing you here. We do exactly the same thing on this end as we did with the other one. I'm not going to show you because you can always rewind what I was showing you earlier on how we were doing it, but we would just do it in exactly the same way. So I hope this has helped you figure out how to weave in your ends, and the next lesson will be blocking, which will be it won't have a video in it. So I hope you've enjoyed this video series, and I will see you in lesson 7.